Sea of Stars! This is a turn-based role-playing game which feels like a love letter to Chrono Trigger, and in many ways it's better than that game. Chrono Trigger had an enjoyable battle system, but to say its story was confusing is to be kind. This is a story that you can actually follow with constantly changing up locations and has mostly interesting characters. Now this is a prequel to The Messenger, which was an action platformer I never played. I just had no interest in it. But you don't have to play The Messenger to enjoy this title, which I appreciated. This was a very enjoyable game. In fact, it's one of the best role-playing games I played this year. Now, it's not perfect, especially when it comes to the two main characters, but overall, it was a blast to play. The story is about Zale and Valerie. They're trained to be solstice warriors. These warriors are the only ones who can stop the dwellers who want to destroy the planet. They're accompanied by a regular guy who's their cook named Garl, and he acts like the leader of the party, and they kind of give up and just let him be. They meet a few other people who join up on their quest to stop the dwellers, including a person we affectionately called the Kool-Aid Man. They kept adding people to the quest 20 hours in, and people will come and people will leave. It was very unpredictable. Almost all of the characters were fleshed out, and were very interesting to experience, except for two. The two main characters had no personality other than being fighters and wanting to stop the main villain. They were so bland, I wasn't even sure if they were siblings or just friends. The least they could have done is have one of them looking for their parents, or some other quest that separates the two characters. But they did nothing with them. And I think they're supposed to be the player's surrogate, and that's why they're so bland. In the beginning you choose which one you want to play as, but you can change this fairly quickly. It wasn't until about halfway through the game that I figured out that they're not even related, but they were dropped off at different times by an eagle. So their backstory is that they were kidnapped by an eagle, and these people took them into their cult, village, and trained them to kill their enemies. Okay, I'm being a little bit facetious here, but to be fair, that storyline was kind of explored, but not with them. They never cared to question anything. I do think a love story between them would have been the easiest way to add a story between them, but the creators didn't even want to bother. The worlds that you explored were varied, so much so I don't want to spoil it. The places that you explore have you jumping, shimmying ledges, and tightrope walking all over the place. I will buy that the Solstice Warriors were able to do this, but some of the characters were not trained. It was a little silly. I think it would have been better to have some of the characters need to find different ways around the world, because some of them obviously couldn't do that tightrope walking. There are some puzzles for you to solve occasionally, and they are about as hard as a kindergartner's shape sorting puzzle. There were block puzzles where you have to push them in a specific place, which was harder, but only slightly. The battle system is turn-based. You walk into a battle and fight the enemies in the area that you're in. One of the best things the system does is that it refills your magic as you do normal attacks, so you don't have to constantly hoard your magic points because you think you might need it later. They don't give you a lot of magic attacks to do though, 3 per character, plus an ultimate attack, but you don't unlock that until later in the game. However, they don't penalize you for swapping characters in battle. You can just swap whoever you want and use them. It was great. There's also a combo system where you can join up with another character for a special attack. You charge up this gauge by doing magic attacks or by hitting the button at the right time to do extra damage. And it also has a damage dodge if you hit the button at the right time. The combo resets at the end of every battle, so it encourages you to use it. If you attack normally, not only do you get some magic back, but also magic balls fly out of the enemies. If you grab them up before your attack, it will actually power it up with the element of your character that it is set to. The biggest problem with the battle system is that every encounter kind of felt similar. Because there's so little moves to choose from, and magic isn't something you need to covet, you would start with the same moves, and not a lot of deviation from that. This game is as hard as you want it to be. You can find and buy relics, which were just options you can toggle on and off. Most of the relics are there to make things easier, like doubling up your hit points and refilling your health at the beginning of every fight, but there were some that would make the enemies harder to kill. This can be switched on and off at pretty much any time. Now this shouldn't come as a shock, but I had most of the relics on because it made the game easier. And kind of because that, the boss fights were not that big a deal, because I was really playing this game more for the story than the battles. However, I did run into a couple bosses, which I have no idea how I would have been able to survive those without the relics. Now the ending to this game felt very rushed. It didn't feel like we were fighting the final boss, but then all of a sudden the credits came up, and I was surprised because there was still some story left. It turns out there's actually a true ending, which I think was good, but it was sure a pain in the There are occasional side quests, and I had pretty much done them already, except for the collectathon with the conches. So I ended up spending a couple hours tediously collecting all of these things, using the in-game help and also out-of-game help, as I used the IGN guide, which turned out to be wrong a couple times. So I turned to Reddit to help me find those. The true ending was a great cap-off, but it also added in a bunch of plot holes I'm not going to discuss. Sea of Stars was fun. It had a great story, and the battle system, while a bit repetitive in places, the places that you explore were not dragged out. So often oftentimes there's actually more exploration than combat, and I love that. Now this is definitely worth a buy. This was a very enjoyable game. While it's not perfect, especially when it comes to the two main characters, overall it's a blast to play, and you should buy it now.